Hey everyone, today I'm going to be taking a look at 3 abstract puzzle games, the first of which being Rossio. Then we're going to take a look at Coral, and we're also going to take a look at Bits. But before I take a look at these 3 games, I want to give a shout out to KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer, and if you use the link in my show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. Okay, so let's start with my least favourite of the 3, that being Coral. This is a 1 to 4 player game that only takes around 15 minutes to play. Now, out of all the 3, this one probably has the coolest spatial elements to it and table presence, as you are placing these high quality wooden coral blocks onto this 3D sculpture. So you're all doing this together, each player has their own colour of coral. Now the objective of the game is to have the most of your symbol showing from a bird's eye point of view, at least by the end of the game. And there are some further restrictions on how you can place these blocks when it's your turn, because as you can see, you actually have your own little kind of player piece as well, and round to round you're going to be moving your piece amongst this coral, bearing in mind you can never pass through your own blocks. And basically where your piece lands, that's where you can place your next kind of coral block. So it has to be connecting to that particular block when you place a new one. And you can even use these to block each other and stuff like that. Now, this is the kind of game I think is definitely better at 2 players, because you can bring that blocking to the forefront of the game and be a bit more tactical with your placements. When you start introducing 3 or a 4th player, I think what normally will happen is that 2 players will get into a bit of a back and forth. The 3rd player will be left to their own devices and probably sneak the win, because nobody is tampering with their, with their symbols. Because obviously a big element of this game is trying to cover other players' pieces and have yours on display so that you have more points and take points away from them. Now that's pretty much the gist of the game. It is very fast. Again, there is a few little tweaks you can do, just to restrict your opponent's movements and things like that. But I kind of just find myself focusing on, playing it simple, just placing my blocks next to where my symbol is and have the most on display. And hopefully by the end of the game, I'll squeak a win there because nobody messes with me too much. So maybe this is a bit of a personal preference, that these kind of games aren't overly for me when I'm when it's just as incentivized for me to do my own thing as it is to sabotage you. But it's fine. It definitely feels like an Asian game. It is, I think it's a Japanese designer here. So it definitely feels like that style of concept, and it works for what it does, but I don't really find it a lot of fun. Again, I find it a little bit too blocky, no pun intended there, where you might squeeze a point or 2 more than your opponent because you just happen to have an optimal placement and cover up one more symbol of theirs than they did of yours. So I don't think this has much potential for those big plays, those big exciting moments. It is just a bit too cerebral and a bit too small feeling for me. So I can't really recommend this one, despite a lovely visual appeal, a cool little little table presence here, and some good components. But yeah, ultimately the gameplay was a little bit lackluster for my own personal tastes. So let's move on to Rainer Knizia's Bits. This is a 1 to 4 player game that takes around 30 minutes to play on average, give or take, depending on how many players you play with. Just by looking at the box cover here, you can probably tell how this game plays. It is a kind of a Tetris variant, but you are using these 2-tone domino tiles where they are split in half. You're placing them on these player boards, and these are quite nice because they are slanted, so they do have a bit of gravity working for you, and they'll slip down or slide down to slot into the next available spot, just like a game of Tetris. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to map out these colours to match with these public objectives and score points accordingly, depending on how many times you fulfill those objectives. Now the game plays out over 4 rounds, and each round a new scoring criteria will be introduced. So I quite like how it's drip fed to you, and as the game goes on you can start, we have more options on how to score. Now that's pretty much the gist of the game. It is very simple. You are kind of using a bingo style mechanism, as each time you're drawing one of these tiles out and everyone's placing the same one. However, you all do start with a different starting tile so that you can't really copy each other. Now, because of that random nature of the game, sometimes you can do things that will just work for you without any intention, and in reverse to that, sometimes you can sabotage your future plans without even realizing it because you don't know what's going to come out next. Yes, sometimes the shapes are color coded and you can use a little bit of deduction saying, I've only got these 3 tiles left to come out, so therefore I'm going to leave this space on my sheet. Hopefully I'll draw that tile out, I'll have the perfect space for it, and then, we're all the winner and we'll score points. But a lot of the time, and this can be somewhat frustrating, you do lay the foundation out. Because you have to use that gravity mechanism, you don't have too much room for manipulation to put tiles where you exactly want them. You might think, well, if I draw this tile right now, it'll be perfect for me and I'll score a bunch of points. If I don't draw it, I'm screwed. So there is a huge luck element to this game, and a big part of that is having no control over it whatsoever. Now, I don't mean to use that against the game because it is ultra simple. It is a bit of silly fun, really, and I do like it. It is enjoyable. It stays true to what it is trying to be. Just complete as many of these shapes as you possibly can. It doesn't take too long. Maybe you can shave a round off to play a quicker game. You could house rule out if you want to, and it's nice. It is what it is. Again, you've pretty much got the whole gist of the game just from me talking about it now. And I would say, if you can find an affordable copy of this and you want a family weight game, a puzzly style game, this is a good one. The tiles are nice to play with. Again, the player boards are nice. The box size is a little bit awkward, but the game is absolutely fine. I've got no issue with it at all, and it's one of those games I'll happily play any time, really. So nothing special. It is just a Tetris variant with dominoes, but it's absolutely fine if you're willing to roll with that luck. And the final game I'm looking at here is Rossio, which is my favourite of the 3. This is a 1 to 4 player game looking at 30 to 45 minutes to play. Now in this one, you are basically building this communal road, and this road is going to be longer or shorter depending on the player count. So this board is completely modular. You're going to be placing these really nice looking tiles to build patterns. Now the gameplay itself is quite interesting, and it's not quite as it first appears, because looking at this you'd think it's pretty simple, just play cards to try and match the patterns on the road. And while that is true, there are a few extra layers here to consider and that add to the gameplay, because this card system is fairly interesting because you are going to be playing them on your player board, your personal player board here, and they'll be active not only for the current round but also for 2 following rounds. So you can either play them as the pattern itself, and doing that is going to cost you money, and money in this game is very tight, and for each time that pattern appears on the road, you're going to score the corresponding amount of points. Again, not only for this round but also for 2 following rounds, so you can actually choose to keep on expanding that pattern to make it score again and again more and more points, or you can play it as the reverse side and generate a coin each time. Now after you've done that, you are going to be playing tiles from your sheet from left to right, adding on to the main road here. There are a few restrictions that you need to consider, because you always have to match a matching tile with a matching tile in order to play more. You can break that pattern, but it will end your turn, which is normally not a good idea, because the more tiles you play in this game, the more money you generate. And again, you need that money in order to play more pattern cards. So I do like the way that works, and also the more tiles you play, it means that you can draft better cards, or you have more freedom or flexibility to draft the exact card that you want. So I do like the way that there is a big potential to score huge points here if you have a pattern that replicates numerous times and you find a matching card. It's very satisfying when you generate huge points, not only for one round but also future rounds. That, in theory, I really like, but in practice it does make it quite difficult for opponents to make up ground, because again, if you're generating huge points and they're not, then it's going to be very difficult to catch up. But that is a small nitpick there, and I do think all these extra layers that take it away from being a basic game actually improve the game, because again, it does add some more decision space into the mix. But that being said, and I may be playing this maybe not optimally, I always found like you would play as many tiles as you possibly could each round, because that would be how you generate more coins, And again, coins you need to use to play more pattern cards. But of course, when you are playing more tiles onto the road, you are creating more opportunities for your opponents, and there might be a matching card in the display there that they'll draft from under your nose and use against you. There's another extra twist where if you complete a column of these tiles, you'll get maybe some extra card draws or some extra money. So all in all, I think this is a very solid game. It is a little bit one note in terms of being repetitive, and despite these extra layers of complexity, the overall strategy was generally the same each time, which is fairly obvious, create patterns and draft the relevant cards matching those patterns. But it is a nice one. I definitely think it's overlooked and underrated, but I think maybe the longevity and the replayability factor is a little bit lacking for me. And when I first played this one, I was a little bit caught off guard. I thought, this is really interesting. There's lots going on here and I like it a lot. And while that is still the case, I think maybe initially I was a little bit duped about how much legs this game had, because it isn't actually that replayable. I think once you've solved it and once you've done really well, you'll pretty much be ready to move on to the next thing. So yeah, while I like the game, I don't think it really holds up to repeated plays, and that longevity isn't really there. So that concludes the video. Hopefully you have found this useful. Ultimately, nothing I could really sing the praises of here. Definitely some redeeming features in all of them, but I think there are better games out there. So if you have enjoyed the video, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to my channel and check out my other content too. And for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye-bye.